In the biting cold of December 1989, the world watched as an entire system began to fracture. One of Eastern Europe's most hermetically sealed communist regimes was crumbling day by day. And at the heart of this political earthquake were Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu. For decades, the couple had ruled Romania with an iron grip forged from fear, propaganda, and an absolute apparatus of control. They had constructed a cult of personality so pervasive that many Romanians dared not even whisper their names aloud. But in a matter of days, their entire world had inverted. At the end of that road, following one of the swiftest trials of the 20th century, Elena would stand before an executioner's platoon. Before she was the feared First Lady, however, she was simply Elena Petrescu, born on the 7th of January, 1916, in the village of Petrești. Her family was impoverished, their lives tied to the hard, unforgiving soil of southern Romania. Education was a luxury her family could not afford, and she left school after only a few primary grades. Those who knew her in later years would recall a woman who struggled to read and write with any fluency. As a teenager, she journeyed to Bucharest in search of work and a different future, finding a place first in a textile factory, then as an assistant in a chemical laboratory. It was there, in the shadows of factory smokestacks and the din of the capital, that she found a new calling in clandestine communist activity. With Romania still a monarchy, the party was an illegal underground movement. In 1939, she officially joined its ranks, and through it, she met a young Nicolae Ceaușescu. Though 5 years her junior, he was already a hardened party conspirator, arrested multiple times for his unwavering commitment to the cause. Bonded by shared ideology and revolutionary dreams, Elena and Nicolae formed an immediate and powerful connection. After the Second World War, the Soviet Union seized control of Romania's political destiny. In 1947, King Michael was forced to abdicate, and the nation was reborn as a People's Republic, with the Communist Party, backed by Moscow, assuming total power. Under the patronage of Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej, Nicolae began his steady ascent through the party hierarchy. Elena, while not yet holding a high-ranking position, remained firmly within his circle of influence. She navigated the party bureaucracy, quietly earning a reputation for absolute loyalty and as a fierce guardian of Nicolae's interests. It was a role she was already perfecting, long before the world knew her name. In the quiet aftermath of a leader's passing, a new power was taking shape, its true nature still hidden in the shadows. When Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej died in 1965, Nicolae Ceaușescu ascended to become the new Secretary General of the Communist Party. And under his guidance, Romania began to carefully distance itself from the direct control of Moscow. It was in this shifting landscape that the character of Elena began to command public attention, despite a conspicuous lack of formal education. By that same year, she was appointed to the Romanian Academy, the first of many state honors and titles she would collect without ever completing her studies. The real breakthrough, however, came in 1971. After a state visit to China and North Korea, Nicolae returned utterly fascinated by the absolute cult of personality he had witnessed. He announced the so-called July Theses, a brutal cultural revolution that imposed strict ideological control over the nation. In the wake of this decree, Elena's image was thrust into public life, crafted as a national model for all to follow, especially women and the young. Her persona was meticulously sculpted and aggressively promoted by the state's immense propaganda machine. She was officially presented as a brilliant scientist, the mother of the nation, and a leading figure in international politics and science. Her official title became Dr. Engineer Elena Ceaușescu. And during public events, long, exaggerated lists of her supposed honors were read aloud to captive audiences. Despite her missing education and a complete lack of any scientific achievement, she was appointed head of the National Council on Science and Technology in 1974. This position gave her direct control over Romania's scientific institutions, research grants, and academic nominations. Under her authority, Romanian chemists and researchers were routinely forced to cite her in their work, to attribute their own discoveries to her name, and to participate in ceremonies praising her fabricated accomplishments. Honorary doctorates were bestowed by universities across Romania, and even some foreign institutions, usually arranged through diplomatic or political pressure. State media produced a torrent of documentaries, articles, and books glorifying her intelligence, materials printed and broadcast in huge numbers. Her image appeared beside Nicolae's on banners, posters, banknotes, and government buildings. A constant, inescapable presence. But her role was not limited to a facade. Inside the party, she played an increasingly vital part in managing the affairs of state, receiving the title of Hero of Socialist Work and becoming a full member of the Romanian Academy. She sat in the Politburo, the highest decision-making body of the Communist Party, and held deep influence over state planning, personnel changes, and the enforcement of ideological discipline. From her husband's shadow, she had become a co-architect of the regime. Within the inner circle of power, Elena Ceaușescu's anger became legendary. Officials who earned even her slightest displeasure could disappear from their positions overnight, pushed to the very margins of political existence. In the corridors of the Central Committee, it was whispered that one of her unwavering opinions could destroy a career built over decades. Her approval became an unwritten but absolutely necessary condition for any advancement. No one dared to make a key decision without her consent. While the nation was forced to tighten its belt, the dictatorial pair swam in opulence. They possessed several palaces, with the Spring Palace in Bucharest as their crown jewel. In an era when meat, sugar, and gasoline were strictly rationed for the people, they had unlimited access to imported delicacies, the latest Western fashion, and luxury cars. It was a world completely detached from the Romanian reality. A gilded cage built upon a foundation of national suffering. A shadow was falling over the nation, born not of war, but of a decision made in a single, gilded office. By 1981, the specter of bankruptcy haunted Romania. A foreign debt of nearly $11 billion hung like a millstone around the neck of a struggling economy. From within the private office of Nicolae Ceaușescu, a brutal and unyielding solution was conceived. With the full backing of his wife, Elena, he unleashed a draconian austerity program. The objective was absolute: to erase all foreign debt, no matter the cost to the Romanian people. Their suffering was not a factor in the equation. Imports were slashed with a surgeon's cold precision. Store shelves, once stocked with foreign foods and essential medicines, now stood barren. Fuel became a precious commodity. But industrial production, the apple of the regime's eye, was granted absolute priority. The great factories were ordered to run at full capacity, their furnaces blazing while the homes of the workers who fed them grew steadily colder. Elena Ceaușescu personally oversaw the nation's scientific and industrial ambitions. frequently meddling in technical matters far beyond her comprehension. Her decrees, however illogical, were final. The results were predictably catastrophic. While real productivity plummeted, state propaganda trumpeted one glorious success after another, painting a picture of a socialist paradise on the horizon. But the grim reality of their policies was not found in newspapers. It was etched into the walls of Romania's cold, dark apartments. Beginning in 1982, a new, chilling rhythm governed daily life. Electricity and gas were strictly rationed, and power cuts became a routine misery. In many cities, the luxury of hot water was available perhaps once a week. As winter descended, a penetrating cold seeped into every home. For central heating was either shut off entirely or reduced to a useless whisper. Hospitals were stripped of basic equipment, and pharmacies stood empty of even the simplest medicines. In the countryside, villages fell back into the flickering light of oil lamps. But worse than the cold, worse than the darkness, was the gnawing hunger. Food was weaponized through scarcity. Strict rationing was imposed on bread, meat, and milk, forcing people into queues that snaked through the streets for hours, often beginning long before dawn. More often than not, their reward was the sight of empty shelves. In cities like Bucharest, gas restrictions forced residents onto electric cooktops, placing yet another impossible strain on the failing power grid. This was all part of Elena's grand vision of total self-sufficiency, a policy rooted in ideology rather than expertise. As head of the National Council for Science and Technology, she imposed impossible production quotas for the scientists and factory directors who failed to meet her absurd demands. The consequences were severe: public humiliation, demotion, and sometimes, something far more permanent. And while their nation starved and shivered, the Ceaușescus enjoyed the insulated comforts of absolute power. They embarked on lavish state visits to China, Iran, and North Korea, where they were received with pomp and ceremony. Each extravagant trip, funded by the state, was a monument to their indifference, a grand spectacle performed while their own people fought a desperate, daily battle for survival. An invisible dread settled over the nation, tightening with each passing day. The shadow of the secret police was inescapable, its power a palpable force in the air itself. By the middle of the 1980s, this apparatus of fear had woven a vast and intricate web. Over 11,000 officials and nearly 500,000 informants ensured that no space was truly private. Eyes and ears followed conversations at the factory, in the quiet of a neighbor's courtyard, and even within the supposed sanctuary of one's own home. A careless word or a lapse in trust during a private conversation could lead directly to the cold silence of an interrogation room, where threats, blackmail, and imprisonment were the state's preferred tools of persuasion. Though foreign journalists were rarely granted unfettered access, whispers of the people's suffering still managed to breach the nation's sealed borders. Clandestine radios, tuned to broadcasts like Radio Free Europe, brought stories of the Romanian ordeal to the West. But listening was an act of defiance that carried the gravest of risks. International human rights organizations raised alarms about the deteriorating conditions. Yet the regime simply dismissed every accusation as hostile propaganda, a symphony of lies from a decadent world. As Romania sank deeper into isolation, Elena Ceaușescu was cementing her position as one of the country's most powerful figures. By 1986, she was not only re-elected to the party's executive committee but also given oversight of crucial sectors, from scientific research to higher education. In government sessions, her voice frequently overrode the Council of Ministers, her authority extending into domains far beyond her comprehension. And yet, her word was final. With the nation cut off from the West and even its Eastern Bloc neighbors, Elena seized the opportunity to tighten her grip on the national psyche. She forced ideological conformity into every school subject. From literature to mathematics, students were compelled to study her biography alongside Nicolae's, reciting passages about their supposed contributions to socialism during exams and public ceremonies. In the Romanian Academy of Sciences and other cultural institutions, loyalty became the only metric of worth. Any hint of criticism was no longer just risky. It was impossible. Academics, artists, and officials who failed to display sufficient devotion were quietly removed or relegated to obscurity, their places taken by those loyal to the regime. Even plays and paintings were censored if they dared to deviate in the slightest from the state's official, glorious self-portrait. Meanwhile, a cottage industry arose to celebrate Elena's alleged genius, churning out ghost-written biographies and scientific papers. Upon the ruins of a nation's spirit, she was constructing a monument to herself. Entire teams of writers toiled in the shadows, their work published under her name by powerful houses with a single mandate: to print books bearing the title Elena Ceaușescu. These volumes, translated into dozens of languages, were then presented as diplomatic gifts or exhibited at foreign conferences. They were pieces in a grand propaganda game, designed to build her image on the world stage. At the same time, the Romanian leadership was turning its attention inward, to the very fabric of the family itself. A tremor was running through the Eastern Bloc, a seismic wave of change, but in Romania, the ground remained deceptively still. As the year 1988 drew to a close, Hungary was alive with discussions of political reform. While in Poland, the banners of solidarity rose once more, reclaiming ground long thought lost, even from the heart of the Soviet Union. Mikhail Gorbachev's calls for openness echoed across the world. For Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu, however, these were not signals of liberation. They were tremors heralding a fatal collapse. They insisted Romania would walk its own solitary path, walled off from the world, from television screens and the front pages of newspapers. A relentless barrage of propaganda assaulted the senses. Speeches attacking foreign ideas warned against the corrupting influence of the outside world. A world descending into chaos, cut off from any reliable source of truth. Ordinary people were force-fed a state-sanctioned story in which the Ceaușescu couple stood as the sole guardians of national stability and order. Yet beneath this veneer of forced unity, a dangerous current of resentment was gathering force. The daily reality for millions was a grim trinity of scarcity, humiliation, and a gnawing fear that permeated every interaction. Internal security reports, delivered to the leaders' desks, painted a stark picture of rising discontent. But Elena refused to acknowledge this truth. She treated every whisper of criticism not as a warning, but as an act of personal betrayal. As the nation sank deeper into diplomatic isolation and the economy teetered on the brink of collapse, Elena Ceaușescu remained unshaken. Convinced their power was absolute, she continued to preside over grand public ceremonies, a stoic figure surrounded by the gilded uniforms of the military and the dark suits of the party elite, projecting an image of eternal strength. But far from the orchestrated applause and the polished ceremonies, the Romanian people were reaching a silent, collective breaking point. The pressure had been building for years, and soon, Something would have to give. In the chill of a December afternoon, a single act of defiance would set the nation ablaze. The first spark was struck in Timișoara on the 15th of December, 1989. It began as a small vigil for Laszlo Tokes, a Hungarian Reformed pastor whose open criticism had earned him the regime's wrath. His parishioners formed a human shield around his home. But their protests soon drew others from the city, their shared frustrations boiling over into the open. What started as a protective circle of parishioners soon swelled, the whispers of dissent growing into a roar of citywide revolt. By December 17, the regime responded with brute force. The army and Securitate received their orders and opened fire on defenseless civilians. In a single day, more than 60 people were killed in Timișoara, with hundreds more wounded or arrested. In the dead of night, the bodies were stolen away and buried in unmarked graves. A desperate attempt to erase the crime from history. But secrets written in blood have a way of speaking. Despite the state's efforts to extinguish the truth, countless witnesses managed to pierce the iron curtain of silence. Their stories, transmitted to foreign radio stations, broadcast the news of the massacre to the world. On December 18, the protests in Timișoara erupted with a doubled fury. Factory workers downed their tools and marched to join the students in the streets. The security forces struck again. But instead of fear, they were met with an even louder, more determined resistance. By December 20, Timișoara declared itself the first free city in Romania. In a stunning reversal, army officers stationed there began refusing orders to shoot upon the people. Meanwhile, Nicolae Ceaușescu, freshly returned from a state visit to Iran, organized a mass rally in Bucharest. It was meant to be a live broadcast of strength and unity, with 80,000 people bussed in from state plants to fill the central square. But just minutes into the dictator's speech, a strange sound began to ripple through the masses. A low rumble, then whispers, then shouts of anti-government slogans. For the first time in his long reign, the nation watched Nicolae Ceaușescu look disoriented, his face a mask of shock. His wife Elena tried to calm him, but it was too late. The broadcast was abruptly cut, plunging the nation into uncertainty as chaos erupted in the square. That night, Bucharest burned. Barricades were thrown up as the city descended into a maelstrom of screams and gunfire. As dawn broke on December 22, news arrived that sealed the regime's fate. The defense minister, Vasile Milea, was found dead under unclear circumstances. The official version claimed suicide, but another story whispered from mouth to mouth that he was executed for refusing to use live ammunition against civilians. His death was the final turning point. Military units across Romania began to abandon Ceaușescu, some openly joining the protesters, others simply refusing to act. That afternoon, revolutionaries stormed the National Television Building, and the fall of the dictatorship was announced to a stunned world. As a new provisional government, the National Salvation Front, began to form. A helicopter lifted from the roof of the Central Committee building. It carried the fleeing dictator and his wife away from the fury they had unleashed. The roar of the helicopter blades was a desperate sound, swallowing the distant crackle of gunfire. From the roof of the presidential palace, Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu turned their backs on a burning Bucharest and fled toward an unknown horizon. Crammed into the tight cabin beside them were a few loyal aides and security officers, their faces etched with the same fear that gripped the pilot. Every movement of their aircraft was being tracked across Romania's closed airspace. The pilot, knowing they were a vulnerable target against the winter sky, feared that at any moment they could be shot out of the air. In a desperate maneuver, he brought the craft down hard in a field near T2, a small town west of the capital. The journey was over. The rulers of a nation were now fugitives on a country road. Their brief taste of freedom was an illusion, wandering the rural lanes in a futile search for shelter. They were quickly located and arrested by local police and soldiers. They were then transported 80 kilometers northwest to a military garrison in Targovist. The base commander, caught between a fallen regime and an uncertain future, received no clear orders and agreed only to hold the couple until the situation clarified. The moment they passed through the garrison gates, their old world ceased to exist. They were stripped of all privileges, their personal guards disarmed and led away. Their new reality was a small, cold room with 2 metal beds, rough military blankets, and crates nailed over the windows. For the first time in decades, Nicolae and Elena were utterly alone. A shock that shattered Elena's composure. Soldiers later recalled her incessant, raging voice echoing in the corridor. She shouted, demanding contact with loyalists, and accused her highest officers of betrayal, insisting the uprising was a plot by foreign powers. Nicolae remained more withdrawn, a quiet disbelief burning in his eyes. Unable to grasp that his regime had truly collapsed, he asked for a typewriter, still hoping he could write an appeal to the party faithful. The request was denied. They were fed the simple rations of the common soldier: potatoes, bread, and water. They were not permitted to wash or change, remaining in the same clothes they wore during their flight. His plain wool coat, her heavy winter coat and scarf. Sleep offered little respite, as guards watched them constantly under the harsh glare of a bare light bulb. A daily medical check confirmed only that they remained physically stable, a cold and clinical assessment of their survival. But outside the barracks walls, Romania was plunging deeper into chaos. Fighting still raged in several cities, fueled by rumors of counterattacks from Securitate forces who had not yet surrendered. The newly formed National Salvation Front, under Ion Iliescu, felt immense pressure from the streets, where crowds demanded immediate justice. Fears mounted that keeping the Ceaușescu alive was a dangerous gamble, a spark that could ignite further bloodshed. By the evening of December 24th, a decision would have to be made. The chill of Christmas Eve settled over Bucharest, but inside the halls of power, there was no peace. After hours of tense, clandestine meetings, the new government had made its decision. The next day, on Christmas, Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu would face a military tribunal. The process was to be brutally efficient, with no possibility of an appeal. On the 25th of December, 1989, the couple was brought to an improvised courtroom inside a military barracks. The entire affair organized in hurried secrecy. Only a handful of officers, prosecutors, and assigned personnel were present to witness what was to come. A special military tribunal, led by General Jica Popa and prosecutor Dan Voini, oversaw the proceedings, which began around 1:30 in the afternoon. The couple had been afforded no prior legal counsel. Their appointed defense lawyer, Nicolae Teodorescu, was given only a few minutes to speak with them before the trial commenced. A single video camera rolled, its unblinking eye capturing the scene for a nation that was not yet allowed to watch. The charges read out were a litany of a fallen regime's sins: genocide, armed attacks on the population, and the systematic undermining of the national economy. The accusation of genocide was based on the court's initial, inflated figure of over 60,000 victims. A number later investigations would revise to just over 1,100. But the charges also carried the weight of decades of oppressive rule, and the unimaginable suffering it had inflicted upon the Romanian people. Throughout the hearing, Elena was a pillar of aggressive defiance. She shouted at the officers, repeatedly interrupted the prosecutor, and rejected the court's authority, calling the entire trial a farce. Nicolae, while more restrained, was equally detached from his new reality, insisting he was still the legitimate leader of the state and demanding to speak before the Grand National Assembly. He claimed the revolution was nothing but a coup, organized by traitors and foreign agents. In the tight, provisional courtroom, his words echoed into a void. The judges, acting under the pressure of time and clear instructions from above, brutally cut short the couple's pronouncements, paralyzing any attempt at a defense. It was not a trial but a grim piece of theater, an urgent ritual meant to legitimize a conclusion already reached. No formal evidence was presented, no witnesses were called, and the defenders were rendered completely silent. The air was dense with an electrifying mixture of fear and determination. Guards stood with their fingers on their triggers, knowing that just beyond the compound walls, the country was still descending into chaos. By 1:45 in the afternoon, the verdict was no longer in doubt. The cold of the courtroom clung to them long after the verdict was read. There would be no appeal, no reprieve, only the brutal finality of the sentence. Death by firing squad, to be carried out immediately. For the new authorities gripping the reins of a nation in chaos, this controversial haste was a grim necessity. It was a desperate act intended to restore order and staunch the bleeding as gunfire still echoed through the streets of Bucharest. Whispers of a counterattack by loyalist forces spread like a contagion, and every passing minute the Ceaușescu remained alive was a minute the old regime might claw its way back from the grave. Within the same military garrison at Târgoviște, the provisional court was adjourned. From that room, Nicolae and Elena were led directly into a small, enclosed courtyard, where a thin layer of December snow dusted the frozen ground. Their time had just run out. An elite paratrooper unit stood waiting, their forms stark against the winter afternoon. Captain Ionel Boru commanded the squad, and he, along with 2 other soldiers, would be the ones to pull the triggers. Under heavy escort, the couple was marched toward their final destination, with no time offered for last words or final wishes. As they stepped into the biting air, Elena's defiance erupted, her voice sharp as she berated the soldiers, demanding they not be separated, that they be allowed to die together. Her sense of superiority, a shield she had worn for decades, remained intact even then. She insisted the court held no power, that she and her husband were still the legitimate rulers of Romania. Nicolae's attempt at composure fractured, his face a pale mask of torment, his hands trembling uncontrollably as they were bound, placed side by side against a bare, grey wall. There was no ceremony, only the cold, practical machinery of the state. The order was given, and a long volley of shots tore through the winter silence. According to reports, death was almost instantaneous. Dozens of bullets ensuring the sentence was fulfilled. The entire event, from the moment they entered the courtyard to the last echo of gunfire, lasted less than 5 minutes. An army operator captured it all on a single video camera. The footage destined to serve as irrefutable proof for the Romanian people, and for the world, that the age of Ceaușescu was truly over. But their death was not the end of the story. It was merely the beginning of the proof. Days later, That grainy, shocking footage flickered across television screens nationwide. For millions of Romanians, it was the first concrete evidence that the dictatorship had fallen, that the suffocating era of fear had finally passed. Their bodies, placed in simple wooden coffins, were flown by helicopter to Bucharest and interred in the Ghencea military cemetery, their graves left unmarked to prevent them from becoming a pilgrimage site for supporters of the old regime, while their execution symbolically closed the chapter on communism in Romania. The nation's slow march toward democracy would be haunted by the deep, unhealing wounds of their reign. Elena, in particular, became an enduring symbol of arrogance and cruelty. The story of her rapid ascent, fueled by ambition rather than education, left a bitter scar on the national memory. And for years, debates over the legitimacy of their trial and execution would smolder. Some called it a judicial farce. Others a necessary evil to avert a civil war. Yet on one point, most Romanians agreed. The terror had ended. Elena's name was stripped from the institutions that once bore it. Her academic works exposed as fraudulent. Then, in 2010, the graves themselves became the center of a final controversy. At the family's request, an exhumation was performed, and DNA tests were used to confirm the identities of the remains. The results left no room for doubt. The bodies resting in Ghencea cemetery indeed belonged to Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu.